See, if people were in the supporting listeners group, they would have been privy to Matthew's blatant racism earlier in the show. The show, which is, by the way, the real show starts when we schedule the show, but choose to work on the show.
Right.
During the time that we scheduled the show.
The pre-show.
Yeah. But like some people will schedule a pre-show like at a specific time. Our pre-show happens during the scheduled time for the actual show.
We're basically Amy's worst nightmare in terms of scheduling, where we're always late to everything, and we have like really undefined times on stuff. We're kind of like, yeah, you know, that works. It just she's very glad that she doesn't have to participate in this the way that we manage business.
Oh, once we get enough supporting listeners, we'll be hiring Amy. I mean,
oh yeah.
Yeah.
No question.
That's going to happen.
She doesn't know that, but she will.
Oh, she knows now.
What's up, people? Got some people popping in here. Cooper and Ian.
What's the quickest thumbs down we can get? We've been live for under a minute, I presume, or about a minute.
I think we had a thumbs down within 30 seconds of the last episode.
Yeah. Is that just like a thing people are doing, or do you think that was like a legit thumbs down?
I don't know. I kind of like not knowing.
Yeah, it's fun.
Amy says, who cares if you're late when you can get super chats? Yeah, technically, you guys should be able to send super chats.
Yeah, you're in the supporting listeners group right now.
Yeah, and we've got another kind of fun little announcement for today, although it's not quite as significant as I was hoping it would be. We do have a supporting listeners group set up, but we're still figuring out how to get people into it. Yeah, you guys will get a little bit more info on that. But if you want to be the first to find out, then we actually created ourselves a subscribe star, so you could start giving us money if you want. It's in the process of being reviewed, and I just did the thing where they tell you to expedite the process by doing a little thing, and so I did that. So hopefully it'll be approved here before too long, before most people have listened to this episode. But you can join the supporting listeners group. Just look up King Pilled on Subscribestar and look for the one that has a really the avatar on it looks like a 10-year-old did it in Microsoft Paint. It's kind of like purple and black and white. Look for that one, and that's the one you guys can sign up if it's available now. But I'll tell you this, just to be perfectly clear, if you're listening to this within the next day or two of when we went live, then as soon as you sign up, then I'll hit you up and get you connected into the supporting listeners group. I know how to do it like on a personal one-on-one basis right now, but I haven't figured out exactly how to automate it. So if you do decide to sign up on our subscribe star here, then just anticipate me reaching out to you to give you the details on how to actually join the actual supporting listeners group. Okay, I think I've got all the housework done here in the back office. The supporting listeners group are the people who can't find the supporting listeners group. Oh, you retracted the message. I wasn't supposed to see it. All right. Oh, the
Giovanni,
dislikes.
Are you like a real Italian person, or are you like an Italian by descent person?
Giovanni, are you real Italian, or are you a poser?
Yeah, are you like me, or are you?
Steve has opinions.
Yeah, I just don't know if he's someone like me or if he's like a real one from like Italy. Are you like System of a Down?
So you were putting yourself in the poser category there with those.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see here. Okay, so looks like we've got a pretty decent number of people in here already. Oh, dude. Oh man, when do you guys let me down in real time? I just looked, and there we go. Leave it that way. Whoever that is that's touching the like and dislike button, don't touch it. Because currently we have 3 likes and 4 dislikes.
That's awesome.
We went negative. Come on, people. Get your act together.
Yeah, see, it doesn't update like that for me as quickly for some reason. So
it's not updating in real time?
I can't participate in that, unfortunately.
Oh, that's unfortunate. Yo! Our first super chat. What's up, Marshall? Shit. $4.99. He says, "Congrats on breaking 1K." Thank you, man.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Marshall.
Giovanni says that he's real.
Oh wow, where in Italian are you, buddy? In Italy are you, buddy?
All right. So I was hoping to get. I was hoping to have an exciting little special guest for today, but he hasn't been answering. So maybe next Monday. As it is, in a little bit here, Populibs, if you want to jump in, and you're welcome to. Steve has to take off at 3, but I'll probably push on a little bit beyond that. So if you're listening right now, you're welcome to hop in at some point. Steven has some strong opinions about protests.
God.
But before we get into that, I got to say thanks to Ian Carroll with our second super chat. He says, might as well contribute before you're demonetized. Yep, that's right.
That's pretty good.
It's going to be quick. Especially given what happened today with the FDA approval of the woke poke. We'll get into that in a little bit as well. But before we launch off into conversation, as we are wont to do, I have to tell you guys about Paloma Verde CBD, the beloved sponsors of this here show, and all the insanity that we participate in here. We appreciate Carlos and Vanessa for supporting us, and so we'd ask you guys to go support them. If you already participate in CBD consumption, then this is your level up. They have very, very good quality stuff. Their gummies are very they're typically when you eat, like, if you haven't eaten a CBD or weed gummy period, there's usually this really, really strong, like, skunky weed flavor to it that's kind of gross, and it sort of sits in the back of your throat even after you swallowed it. These don't have that at all. These are fantastic. They just taste like gummies. So it's hard to not eat lots of them at once, but I love taking them at night before I go to bed. And I need to restock as well. So they've got the gummies, they've got muscle rub, they've got a tincture, they've got little the micro capsules. They're really, really good. And
that was my nickname
so
in high school.
Micro capsule or really, really good.
No, micro capsule. Yeah.
Anyway, so PalomaVerdeCBD.com, use promo code KING. You get 25% off any order over $75. And I just so happened to listen to another podcast. I got started on another podcast that also advertises for Paloma Verde CBD. And the host of said podcast was talking shit about other promo codes. And so I'm going to return fire. If you are so inclined to use promo code popular, you definitely shouldn't. You should absolutely use promo code KING. Promo code KING is the best way to get 25% off any order over $75 when you order from PalomaVerdeCBD.com. Yeah. That's promo code KING. Promo code KING, not promo code popular. Promo code
I've heard
KING.
that. I've actually, I was on a Reddit forum because I've definitely used Reddit ever. And people were talking about
Virgin.
That, yeah, people were talking that some of the, and I think that was one of them, some of the promo codes actually charge you more. And I think that was one of them, the popular one.
Yeah.
Someone was complaining that they got charged an additional 25% when they used promo code popular.
That's right. Yeah, it's he's a sneaky fellow, that popular guy. Uh-oh. Good thing that I set our subscribe star to 18 and over, because Joshua is getting spicy in the chat.
Uh-oh. Joshua, are you under 18, buddy?
That was an odd segue. You sound way too excited about that. I think I'm going to change.
I was just curious. How's it going, pal?
Okay.
How's school? Oh, I'm going. Yeah. No, this is supporting listeners. Yeah. We'll say this is for supporting listeners. Yeah.
Okay,
sure.
deal.
Sorry about that. That wasn't a bit or a tease or anything like that. That was me almost sharing something, and then I realized that it's not to be shared on YouTube. It's to be shared.
I'm getting to where I'm having so many conversations and so many different platforms and groups and everything that I'm starting to be like, I can't keep track of which conversations I've had with which people and which people know which thing. So what I'm saying is, if you have any secrets to tell, you probably shouldn't tell them to me, because I don't know everything is just kind of a blur. You know, we
Mm-hmm.
put together having a baby with this and everything, and it's just everything is just kind of a blur. So I have this thing where I just completely forget who I'm talking to and what I'm talking about very often. I
Agreed.
very rarely know what I'm talking about. So if you're listening along here or following anything that we talk about, and you think that you're getting some, you're like tapped into some source of insight, buyer beware.
Yeah. No. That's why the titles of the shows have like a at best 50% like chance of being indicative of whatever we're talking about. You know? I don't know what the title of this one is, but we might not get there.
Yeah, it's very possible. I think actually I think we're gonna get there because I think we're
Okay.
gonna get there right now. But
Okay.
first, before we do that, I need to take this hoodie off because I jumped the gun. I thought that it was gonna be cool today, and because it's been
Let's
cool
take this
lately.
opportunity to
So
Matt, do your thing, and I'll take this opportunity to tell our listeners about our sponsor, Paloma Verde CBD. That's right, fans. You gotta as someone who has eliminated their video, you gotta make sure that you take down the audio too for maximum effect, Matthew, for future reference. If you want to be dramatic, I'll show you how it's. No, I'm kidding. That'd be weird. What would happen if we both took off our video? Just a black screen? Would it be a Restream logo? But our friends Carlos and Vanessa at palomaverdecbd.com have offered you, our listeners, a very special discount on orders of $75 or more. You can save 25% with promo code KING. That's right, promo code KING. And I believe, I'm not 100% on this. You want to email Carlos and Vanessa about this, but I believe that with the FDA approval of the injection there, you can get an exemption if you order Green Paloma CBD. That will be viewed as an equivalent, if not supersede any future boosters that you may need. If you can show proof of purchase from Green Paloma, palomaverdecbd.com, promo code KING.
so we're in the process of pissing off all of our sponsors, huh? YouTube and
Sponsors in
Big
partnership
Pharma.
with partnership with YouTube.
I just let the secret out.
Oh my gosh.
So okay, so we titled today's show "Your Facebook Friends Are Wrong About Protests," and
Mm-hmm.
the obviously we're riffing off of a certain character's way of phrasing certain things, but that's not intentional. We aren't we aren't trying to call anybody out in particular. It's just a fun. It's just
He
kind
said
of
one
like
of
a
my
fun way
favorite
of
things of
memeing.
all time, actually, about protests. It was like last summer. Time is not real, but it feels like it was last summer. And he was just, I forget who he was talking to, but yeah, I think he was talking to somebody. He did have a guest that day, but he was just kind of frustrated as everybody was, and sort of at a loss of what to do. And he was just kind of like, do we need to protest? Like, what do we need to do? I hate to admit it. I've always just thought protests were retarded or something along those lines. I don't know if he said retarded, but he said something very close. And it was like, you know what, Tom Woods, I feel similarly. I feel that, was he talking to Dave Smith himself? I don't remember. But yeah, it was so good. He may have called them retarded. And I think basically that is an impulse that's in a lot of people who probably align with how we see the world. And I think it's for good reason, and it's because they don't really work for us. Like if there's an us, just anyone in the universe of people who use the word, liberty in any kind of like positive context. Anybody like if you voted for Trump, you're in the bucket. Just anyone over here on this side of things. Just protests aren't going to work for you ever. They're almost always going to be counterproductive. So feeling like protests are kind of retarded. That's a great impulse. That's a great impulse to have. And I think that that like he should say that more. Like I haven't listened to a lot of podcasts because since doing this basically. But but like I think that should be like a T-shirt or a coffee mug or something, like protests are retarded. That would be very useful compared to like a lot of what we're seeing on Twitter currently.
Shout out Top Lobster. I mean, I'm not trying to connect Top Lobster to what we're seeing on Twitter. I'm talking about the T-shirt. Top Lobster needs to make a protest or retarded T-shirt.
Protest or retarded. That would be a good one. Yeah, that's a T-shirt that in messaging that I could certainly get behind, because I don't see any real evidence to show otherwise, certainly, and that's sort of been like the default position. And I know things are getting kind of wonky out there, but I don't know that means that an uprising of any kind whatsoever, like is gonna help the cause at all. I put out something on Twitter, and it's so hard on Twitter. I mean, well, it's hard for me and hard for using Twitter as like a medium, and then me using Twitter. It's very hard not to come off as a cunt. But I wasn't trying to be one. And I just because I'm very open to being wrong, in sort of this occupying this space of not really being ideologically married to particularly anything. I've got certain things that seem to make a lot of sense, but I'm always willing to like refine them. And I was just asking, is there anyone in the liberty world who in the past 18 months has really done anything in the way of civil disobedience, unrest, protests, anything in that vein? And like, how did it work out? And it was an honest question. So I was really like open to hear any stories or any anecdotes that anyone had, okay, yeah, well, over here in, such and such Nevada, a group of us did this with this person and this was the result. That's kind of what I was looking for. And I haven't really checked, but I haven't been seeing a whole lot of like raging success stories. I did see some people said that, we had meetings and nobody wore a mask. And I think that's great. That's good for you, but that's not, I wouldn't classify that necessarily as like a protest per se. That seems like people who are like-minded getting together and, doing their thing kind of surreptitiously, which I think is exactly what is needed. And then, but like the whole, everything else, like in the public eye, no. And I guess my thought would be, if there's no evidence that this is a strategy that is going to work for anybody, and we do have like the opportunity to watch what happens in Australia, and I'm psyched to watch. I don't pretend to know what's going to happen. I mean, I think I know what's going to happen, but I'm happy to see how it turns out, because I do think that things are going to get kind of hairy here. But if there's no real evidence in the past 18 months of observing life that it's going to be a helpful strategy, I would begin to think twice as time goes on about anybody who is advocating for that strategy. That's as much as I'm prepared to say at this juncture. But I think it's worth a look. I think I was thinking of steps you could take. It's just like, okay, do I know this person? How well do I know this person? Do I know them to have? Do they have the ability to protest themselves? Do they have the ability to organize people to protest themselves? Have they protest themselves? Are they organizing people to protest? Are they putting why are they not doing that? Do they have a mailing list? Do they have a following? It's just because you are seeing people who have the capacity to organize people, asking why no one's doing anything. And so if we apply some praxeology real quick, we go like this. But how come, and then that's like your good starting point, is just you kind of go, you do the, well, but how come you, and then you just follow that. And then I think the end of that road and the end of those questions are, maybe I'm not going to do anything too wacky, because these people don't seem to be doing anything too wacky or have plans to do anything wacky. And I don't know why they're saying that we should do wacky shit when they don't want to do it.
So I was saying a minute ago about how it's like, I get this feeling now where I can't keep all my conversations straight. I can't remember who I've talked to and who I haven't. Yeah. And at the same time, there's a hell of a conversation that's going on. Right. There's a there like if you aren't starting to become cautious in what you're talking about and around who you're
Mhm.
talking about it, then y- you should,
Mhm.
because I mean, I've been saying for a few years now for that people should act as if they have no privacy. Don't assume that you have privacy, because if you assume that you have privacy, you're going to eventually you have something to lose. If you act like you have privacy, you have secrets. Those secrets are of vulnerability. Those secrets are a weak spot. There's something that can come back to haunt you. People, it's a piece of leverage that somebody can have on you.
That's one of the tiers
Ultimate.
in the Subscribe Star, is that there's a weekly Stevie's Secrets from the past. You can at a certain level, you're invited to observe that stream, which is available to certain supporting members only.
This is his bi-weekly acid drop. He just throws up
Emphasis on
throws
bi.
up a live stream.
Mm-hmm.
And we just watch you lose your mind for 3 hours.
Stevie's bi-weekly scandalous secrets.
It's like we gave you a truth serum and your brain is just bearing itself in front of us.
Yeah. It's a short life stream.
There's not much in there.
Hey now.
So there's it should be very clear to you at this point that there are people out there who despise you, don't want you to exist. At the very least, they don't want to be aware that you exist. So if you're going to exist, you better stay out of their sight. Just don't let them know that you exist, and they'll be fine. They don't want you to have any impact or influence whatsoever on their life. And they are rabid and radical and deranged. And they relentlessly work to take over every institution they possibly can to weaponize it against the people that they don't like you and me. When you have to come to grips with the fact that you live in a world with people like that, and those people are gaining ground big time. They're gaining ground over some of the most sophisticated, I was going to say military. It's not even, it's above the level of military assets ever. They are becoming their consciousness is becoming assimilated into the consciousness of the regime. And the regime is weaponizing them to centralize its own power through whatever means possible. It doesn't have the regime itself doesn't have explicit hostility toward individual people, as long as you stay out of its way, as long as you stay out of the eye of Sauron. You can let it kind of do its thing and mostly remain out of the collateral damage. But you have to be smart. You have to behave in an intelligent way. And directly confronting, directly calling out, directly attacking the regime is not the way to do that. Now, you might say, like, what I'm doing right now seems like I'm directly attacking and confronting it, but I'm not. Because I'm not talking about it on a level that connects with people. I'm talking about it on like kind of a weird, vague, woo-woo, mystical thing where most people are kind of like, they just kind of tune me out.
Wait, what?
That compromises the reach of the message that I'm talking about. That compromise. I consciously am aware of that, but that's necessary. This is like what Vin Armani was talking about when he is like we took the stop being poor thing and ran with it. He took the vague wizardry thing and ran with it.
Who was the first person to use the term vague wizard?
I think it was Top Lobster.
That's so fucking funny.
Yeah.
God damn it. That is, I saw people use that term, vague wizard. God, that's great.
Necessary.
But to his credit, he was just like, "Yep, exactly. You got it."
That's exactly, yeah.
Which is also great. Oh boy.
There's a lot of power in being able to take the slings and arrows, so to speak, being able to take them and just turn them into assets. Shout out!
Wait.
Oh, great! Now,
Speaking of assets, all right. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. One thing with doing super chats now is it means I have to pronounce people's names, and I'm not always going to be very great at that. So, Malin Keisner, $5. A political compass, but it's just people who are cool if I say that something is retarded versus people who Yeah, that's kind of like the based versus that's kind of like the based cringe spectrum. And then Naptime said, "What?
I thought I knew a woman named Mylene, but
Mylene?
Yeah, but like I don't think that's how you say that name. But you're but
just I see.
Memory lane.
Yeah.
There's no way that's not a woman. There's no way. That was.
See, this is man. I was looking at the statistics for our channel on YouTube, and it has the gender breakdown, and it's like 99.7 men.
Fuck yeah. Yep. Yeah.
I think there's probably like 3 people. There's probably like 3 women who are in our audience. So we are even further to the completely misogynistic end of the scale than actual libertarians are.
That's
kind of based. Anyways, nap time. $5. Hearing supporting listeners chat was here all along gave me the same feeling that Populiv gave me when he said we were in Kapistan this whole time. That's fantastic.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Oh man, really? I'm already here.
I'm already here.
Where someone in the comments, I have to shout out someone, I don't remember who it was, commented on the last episode and said, oh, I lost my bet that the supporting listeners group was really just Matt and Steve's personal conversation back and forth with each other. And we'll say that was what it was. When we were talking about it, that's what we were, that was obviously our the joke, that the inside joke kind of that we were pretending to have.
Yes. Oh, the breaking the fourth wall. Now that we've reached the pinnacle of success at 1,000 subscribers on YouTube.
That's right. Yep. That's to me
a retrospective with Matthew. I didn't fucking think we were gonna get there, buddy. Yeah. I don't know. Shout out
to me. I'm kind of like, I feel like I could kind of sail through the rest of my life now.
Oh yeah.
I've accomplished great things.
Definitely.
Okay, so back to protests. So one thing, let me see, where's the tweet I'm looking for? So I want to get this tweet out there first of all, and then we'll kind of dig into it a little bit more. So I said this week in a thread with a few different people, Poppy Lives, Clint Russell from Liberty Lockdown, and some other people were in it. And I said protest is an implicit admission of and submission to the absolute power of the regime. If someone's protesting, that means they don't have the power to actually change anything. So it's kind of implicit in, like, people who can change something don't protest for change, they just change it. So if you're protesting, that means that you're like you are like a child's relationship to their parent. That's you have that sort of relationship is assumed if you're protesting. So if someone's protesting, that means they don't have the power to actually change anything. So then there's no real incentive for the regime to relinquish power. If you don't have the power to actually change anything, in other words, if you're supposed to, if you're presenting yourself as someone who wants to change something, then you have to have some sort of, like, there has to be a cost. What's the cost if we don't change something from the perspective of the regime? And the very fact that you're protesting implies that you don't have the capability of doing something more about it. People say, "Oh, well, it's just a warning." No, it's not. You wouldn't have to give a warning if you could actually change it. So there's no real incentive for the regime to relinquish power at all. And so then you get the archetropic factor, which is where the regime has a desire for outbursts of chaos, because that creates an opportunity for them to step in and impose order. So that's where this conversation, at least for me this week, this is where this rose up onto my radar with this video that was going around on August 20th. Just in, chaotic scenes as protesters break through police barricades in Melbourne, Australia. So there's all these protests going on in Australia because Australia's gone complete retard. They've gone completely mad, totally locked down everything, and they're totally out of control. So everyone there is protesting. They unfortunately gave away a huge number of their firearms several years back, and they probably kind of wish they hadn't now, at least some of them. So people were pointing to this as like look, this is a win. The police couldn't even hold them back. They broke through the lines. They amounted so much force that they overcame the police.
Yeah, man. just like in well.
Oh, oops. And it's funny because a lot of people, like anybody, can recognize that what happened on January 6th was not helpful to the cause of liberty.
You don't think so? Didn't help anything?
No.
It
everyone can recognize the fact that it. What's that?
You don't feel like you have more liberty now?
Right. Everybody can recognize the fact that them doing that created a pretext for the state to be far more tyrannical than if they hadn't done that. Yet they'll be able to hold that thought in their head. They'll internalize that, but then they'll turn around and they'll look at this and they're like, look, this is a white pill. They're winning. They're not. This is not winning. This isn't what I said when I saw that clip. Is I said this is going to serve as a catalyst for even more brutal crackdowns. These protesters are actually making life worse on themselves by creating a justification for more tyranny. And you can see when you watch the video, when you see them break through the lines, you can see the people collectively, they're all kind of like, okay, now what? Like there was no plan beyond breaking through the lines. There was just break through the lines. It wasn't an organized, concerted effort with plans to, we're going to break through the lines and then we're going to, and then with the ultimate goal of, there is none of that. All there is just angrily rebel and keep roiling around until eventually something gives. And then just kind of run into that space. What next? What next? There's nothing beyond that. That's why you can tell that this isn't going to end well. These aren't serious people. I'd wager that the majority of them aren't even in this because they believe in the cause. I think that should be very, very obvious. It should be very obvious that these mass protests in the street now are conducted very, very similarly to mass protests in the street last year. There's just a different focus now. Is there? Is there actually, if you look at the actual consequences of the protesters, if you look at the way that the system interacts with them and responds to them, is the trajectory different? Are we going in a different direction with these kinds of protesters versus, or are these protesters just serving as proof of how dangerous unwoke-poked people can be? These people who are resisting the new pharmaceutical innovations aren't just doing it for their own self-interest. They're attacking people in the streets. They're running around, rampaging through the city. They're even overwhelming the cops. These aren't just peaceful people who just want to be left alone. No, look at them. Look at how violent and chaotic and dangerous they are. If we didn't have the regime here, not only would we not have these life-saving pharmaceutical treatments, but these people would be breaking into our houses and stealing them. These people would be terrorizing us. You see how easy that narrative is to sell. It fits in just perfectly. Now you've created the pretext for the escalation. See, if you have a one-party state, if you have a completely dominant totalitarian regime, It needs to create a justification for its own escalations, because there's now it's a one party. There isn't another party there to create that escalation. Nobody's buying the Democrats versus Republicans thing anymore. It's not working as well. It's a lot clumsier, and it's really costly. It's very hard. You have to keep a lot of people herded around like cats to keep that charade going. So the regime needs to have a foil that allows it to escalate, to take more power, to move the agenda forward. So when people go out into the streets and they protest, when people start having a lot of violent anti-regime rhetoric, that creates the foil, that creates the opposition. And even better for the regime is if that opposition that's violent and revolutionary in its rhetoric, it's even better if that opposition gets a hold of some institutions. It's really good because that makes it seem even more legitimate. Like, look at this. This is an uprising. This is the Nazi Party all over again. They're just going to get their foot in the door. And then all of the anti-regime sentiment is all going to flood to that one locus, that one like isolated body that now becomes the target. And everybody else who is an enemy to the regime becomes associated with that target, the enemies of the state. And the totalitarian state is able to sell itself as a victim because individual people look at themselves as an individual up against this behemoth of anti-regime sentiment wrapped up in an institution. And they see like these people could come after me. So that's very easy to sell. And then everybody else that's all bandied together with me, they're all the same. We're all just lone individuals against this big force, uprising, revolutionary body. So when this is why lockdowns, or not lockdowns, but protests, public protests, do not serve the interests of anyone against the regime. The regime needs opposition. It needs as coherent and legitimate of an opposition as it can get. That's the mechanism that it uses to expand its own power.
I know not anyone in this audience is naive enough to take this perspective, but I do believe that I've seen people kind of look at last summer and say, well, look, they protested all summer, and I don't know what the and is. We'll get to that. But the idea is that there were these protests. There was property damage. Sometimes mostly peaceful, I think is the line that we would say about those protests. But man, am I frozen or are you frozen? I'm gonna keep talking.
I'm moving.
Okay, yeah. You were really still for a moment. Holy shit, you're like transfixed.
I was reading.
Yeah, but the idea that like, okay, protests have existed previously, therefore we can have our protest. I know, again, no one that's in this chat right now would be naive enough to take that position. But even if you look at the people who were protesting, if you talk to them, I'm pretty sure that they'll tell you that they got used by the regime in so many words. Like they were not happy with any end result. Like they got some symbolic victories. Like I'm pretty sure that in some Costco's there's like a fuck white people Wednesday. I don't know when in relation to the protests there was like Aunt Jemima had her last printing on a label. But like that's the kind of shit that was like happening. I think that guy was going to get found guilty regardless. I'm sure. But even then, like they tweeted out, in so many words that they just got used. So if they're operating like with the political wind, and I think think everyone hopefully everyone who's listening understands that you you are not operating with any wind, political or otherwise. You are very much an against the wind person if you're listening to this. So I don't know like what hope, again, observing the past 18 months, that anyone would have for an outcome. I do, however, have a Twitter poll. So if you go over to at Messina Inc. And make sure not to follow it or unfollow it if you are following it. But I believe pinned up there is a Twitter poll asking what you predict the results of the Australian protests to be: increased restrictions, decreased restrictions, or no effect. And it'll be up for about 8 more hours. So Australia, obviously, not the United States of America, or is it? But it's an interesting data point to kind of look and just see what comes, if anything, of all this.
Real quick before we continue this conversation, I just have to shout out, I see a tweet here from Popular Liberty that tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern, his guest is the excellent Clint from Liberty Lockdown, and they're going to be talking about the benefits of political protests. That will be a very interesting conversation. Those are two good minds to have it out, and that should be a really interesting conversation. So go follow Popular Liberty on Twitter, Popular Liberty _ on Twitter, and go follow his YouTube channel as well, so you can get that. That'll be interesting.
That will be interesting.
So this actually ties real quick. I want to read this super chat that we got from Nicholas here. He said, the act of protest is speaking power to truth. If you don't already have the power, you don't really have anything to say by protesting. That's very good. I wanted to pop that up there for a minute. So this is actually related to a tweet that I made last week that got people pretty riled up.
Ooh.
And then my response to them getting riled up got them even more riled up.
Ooh.
So this is a story you've heard before, I'm sure. But so the tweet was that historically speaking, anarchy is a subset of democracy. And I said historically speaking for a reason. This is the tweet. I think I talked about this on our last episode. But what I'm driving at with that tweet is I'm saying that you wouldn't arrive at anarchism, at the anarchy being the hypothetical ideal world described within anarchism. You wouldn't arrive at that without first having the philosophical presuppositions of a Democrat, a little d Democrat. So it's the notion of anarchy as anarchists have conceived it is historically downstream from democracy. So they're describing an arrangement of people, but the way that they arrived at that understanding, the presuppositions that they had, and the view of the world that's inherent in understanding the world as laid out that way, these are all Democrat presuppositions. You see that what they're looking for, the idea of anarchy, is that as a principled basis, there must be equality in the arrangement of political power. That no one has the right to have political power over someone else. Political power must be communized. Political power must be, this is how, you can either think of it as nobody has it or everybody has it, because it's the same thing. This is how Yarvin has framed it as the belief that political power is a human right, and that everyone has the right to have political power. That's latent in the idea that if you say everyone is a sovereign individual, you're saying that political power is a human right, which is obviously incoherent. It's obvious that I guess it's not entirely coherent. You're just creating the pretext for might makes right, which is kind of how the world ends up working out. So, but obviously when people are conceiving of these ideas, they're trying to create a goal. They're trying to create a hypothetical to strive toward, to move toward. So what they're trying to do is to discover the truth about humanity, the truth about the way that human beings arrange themselves and how they should arrange themselves, and match those together. They're trying to put those together, and they're trying to create a, a prescription that everybody can participate in. That is a democratic process. That is a little d Democrat. This is upstream of the state. Democracy starts upstream from the state. If the only way you can conceive of democracy is as people voting, that's an application of democracy. That isn't democracy itself. The voting is not the democracy. The conception of the individual that is participating in it, the conception of their relationships to each other, that's where democracy begins. That's the starting point of democracy. And anarchy is downstream from that, because anarchy is taking that conception of the individual and universalizing it. And that's a phenomenon or a trait that you only find in democracy or ideologies that have been descended from and affected by it. That's like a key innovation of democracy. And really, it's a perversion of a Christian principle. So it really came from Christianity originally. And this is the process, this is kind of my theory, the process of the Reformation into the Enlightenment and the conception of classical liberalism is a historical process that you can't separate. It's all a continuum. The same thing has been happening. This process has been going on for centuries. And what I'm kind of arriving at is that this conception of the individual that's latent in democracy, and therefore that's latent in anarchy, properly speaking, that conception of the individual is actually the Antichrist. That it takes, or it occupies the archetype of the Antichrist, because I think that there are many Antichrists. There isn't necessarily one single one. There's a spirit of Antichrist. So it is the spirit of Antichrist. So the way that affects here then is anarchists, libertarians who are looking at this process here. What they're assuming is the Democrats' view of individuals and the role of the state with respect to those individuals. So they're assuming that the state is responsive to individuals, that it's representative of individuals. Their problem with it is that it's insufficiently representative. And so then the goal of a protest is we're going to assert our rights that we have in sufficient number that these institutions that respond to us are going to change the way that they behave. And it doesn't work that way at all. That isn't there. That relationship doesn't exist. Think about the way that you could know this is go outside of a democratic context, like pre-democratic or just completely separate from a democratic context. And now imagine a group of people behaving like this, going into the streets and just going and like yelling and chanting and protesting something at another group of people. They wouldn't do it. It just wouldn't exist. Either they would be out there fighting or they'd be sitting down and having a conversation. They're not going to go up and like chant outside them. This is a very distinctly historically democratic sort of behavior. So all of these things are all examples of how libertarians have conceived of they've recognized the flaws in the manifestations of democracy, and they've conceived of a world that is non-democratic, that is anti-democratic, but still in like the baseline of their subconscious, they still are running that program. They're still running the democracy program. It hasn't been completely shut down and removed from their minds, because it's just about at like the base layer of our consciousness at this point, given the way that we have been enculturated into it. It's very difficult to remove. I haven't removed it for myself. I still naturally think and perceive the world as a Democrat. as a Westerner, as a liberal. These are all kind of synonyms. They all sort of describe different aspects of the same thing. But these protests are fictions sponsored by and supported by and allowed by the regime. By definition, if the regime didn't sanction these protests, they would go kill all of them. So if these were actually opposed by the regime, all of these people would be dead. But they're not. So the regime is tolerating it. It's permitting them to do what they're doing because it can extract some value. It extracts utility out of what they're doing.
There's a really good like jiu-jitsu meme. So it's sort of like inside baseball or whatever, but it's like two cats fighting, and there's like a cat that's on top, and he just sort of very calmly, his expression is just totally docile, but like the cat underneath is like pushing his like face up like this, and the cat is just sort of like tolerating it, and presumably the cat underneath is just freaking the fuck out. And it's something along the lines of like me after I get side control, waiting for all the bullshit to subside. It's pretty good because basically once you kind of have somebody like inside control, it's a pretty secure position, you know, and like you can kind of just make adjustments very easily if you know what you're doing. And but like there will be people who really frantically try to freak the fuck out to save themselves, and it's just, you know, you get the idea that it's like you're really not going anywhere. So once you both realize that that's happening, really all you're doing is waiting for the bullshit to subside. And I can't I can't help but think of that every time that I see something like this.
Yeah, that's the you're saying that you love. Don't just do something. Stand there.
Yeah, and like that's one of the ones that was you know, when this is like broadly, not even just in terms of like protest but just, you know, for example, like joining like a political party that is comprised of mostly white guys who really like guns and are very public with saying antagonistic things about the government publicly as a means of in-group signaling. Like, for example, doing something like that. But basically just in a broader sense of like, this sucks, you know, what do I do? I should certainly just do something. When Nick Paul made his farcical, non-existent, get my hopes up invitation about doing like a little mini podcast about things that combat sports will teach you about politics, I guess. I forget what the premise, something along those lines. That was like one of the things. Like if you've ever been in the position where you're under I don't know, you're underneath like a 185-pound like purple belt or something like that, and you're just like you're kind of like a powerless like white belt who has like bad cardio, doesn't really know how jiu-jitsu works. It's just like you learn very quickly that, you know, your idea is to just fucking do something, man. You know what I mean? You got to try to do something. It's just like it's like the worst. It's the worst of advice, or just like somebody observing. It's like advice that someone observing would give. Just like, hey man, just fucking go for it. You know what I mean? And just like you fucking going for it, you know, usually winds up with you being like unconscious or like having like your arm ripped off. And then you can look and you can just be like, but that guy on top of you, he's only 185-pound purple belt. He's not that's fine or whatever, as far as I'm going to, you know, in going out of the metaphor, like as far as regimes go, you might not be particularly impressed by this one, but just like they've got like a lot of experience regiming, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like they know how to jiu-jitsu shit. You know, like in terms of how to jiu-jitsu shit, they're better than a purple belt, bro. You know, like way better, and they weigh more than $185. And they also they hate you on top of it all. So it's just like anyone who's had the pleasure, I don't know. I think that like these ideas of just like, well, I have to do something, you know, like you are quickly divorced of those ideas.
This reminds me of This reminds me of a story I heard just recently. I don't know how it came across my YouTube, but there was a guy talking to another guy who had a pretty famous incident of getting attacked by a bear. He was
Mm-hmm.
attacked by a grizzly while he was out hiking. This was in, I think it was like 2016.
Mm-hmm.
And he posted a video of himself when he got back down to his truck, and it went viral, and that's how people found out who he was. But what he said is that he had this encounter with the bear, and he actually ended up running into the bear multiple times, and she attacked him at least twice. It might have been a third time, I don't remember. But she, like at first, she came at him and she kind of like attacked him and sort of put him down, and then took off back to her cubs. And then he started to hike out, and they ran into each other again, and she came at him again, and or like she went back and checked on her cubs, and then came back to him again. And so that second time that she hit him, she had him pinned down to the ground, and she was kind of like biting at him and sort of just like putting him down, and she bit into his arm and like snapped his humerus and like ripped a bunch of shit out of his arm.
Yeah.
And
Nothing funny now, am I right? Humorous.
And when she did that, he flinched. He said he like flinched and kind of made a sound and jerked his arm away, just kind of reflexively. And she absolutely lost her shit and just went crazy, just like snapping at him and biting him like 20 or 25 times all over his back and shoulders and back of his head, and like picking him up and shaking him and chucking him, and then running and jumping on him and doing that multiple times. He said that as soon as she heard him respond and react like that, it was like she lost her mind. She went completely crazed. And there's like an animal instinct there, especially for a predator, that if you're trying to put something down, especially if it seems like a threat to you or to your loved ones, then if it's not moving, it may not be dead, but your radar, you kind of calm down. You're like, all right, at least he's not a threat. He's not doing anything. As soon as you move, now you're a threat again, and now you need to be put down even harder than before. So you get a feedback loop here where it's not going to end with you winning. By definition, you're not going to be the one that comes out of that one on top. So there's kind of a similar dynamic here where very clearly this is an apex predator. It's the apex predator of apex predators. It's an extremely well-adapted, well-evolved machine. It's so good that it runs incredibly effectively with really, really ordinary people within it. It uses the bare minimum, lowest common denominator to rule the world. That's how effective it is. So trying to take it on head on through some kind of show of force is functionally indistinguishable from actually working for it deliberately. There's a reason that Fed posting is a thing. There's a reason that people understand that concept of Fed posting. People innately understand that there are people connected with the regime who go out and bait other people into acting against the regime. So then why would you volunteer to be that person? Why would you go out of your way to do the very thing? Or is it just like, oh, well, we're actually going to win. We're actually going to be better. Well, you'd better win. Because if you don't, you just made things much, much worse, not just on yourself, but on anybody even tangentially associated with you. I guarantee you that this is the type of regime that punishes people's family members in front of them. I'm not saying literally necessarily. I'm saying spiritually.
I'm down for we do a show in like a week or so, and the restrictions are rolled back in Australia, and there's a public announcement from the Australian government that says, geez guys, I guess we really overreacted. Good point taken. And I would really look forward to that. But I don't know. I hope that we can observe what happens and learn from it. That's all. And it's not to say that it will be like applicable to here, like one to one, but it would be good to see. And then, if it doesn't work, or if things go more sour, it would be interesting to see if the people who are calling for protests here still seem to be gunning for it. because like you're kind of, you know how it's like you're talking about being functionally like indistinguishable from like working for the regime, like also what you were saying basically, that someone, are they a Fed? Well, like do they have paperwork in with them? Like if they act as if they were, they serve the same function. Like, does it matter?
Right.
Matter?
Exactly. I guarantee that the majority of people who are feds who play that role, I don't even know that they're feds.
Right. It's just like you can kind of see like you can kind of see like FBI headquarters or what the fuck ever. Just kind of like, okay, yeah, this guy looks like he's ripe. All right, what's his number? Okay, let me just check his Twitter one more time. Oh, all right, go ahead, buddy. Like, just do your thing. You got it. We don't need to have a meeting or anything like
that. Right. Yeah. And then even further removed than that, there's the people that the regime's like, we don't even have to. Like, we don't even have to get involved.
Right.
You don't even have to. Like the people will serve that function. The people will embody that role automatically. And this is kind of like the thing with social media, is that it's depersonalized a lot of society to where you don't have to, if you're thinking of things purely in the material sense, you're going to look at, like, you want to imagine like the scenario you just described, where someone in a dark suit meets some guy behind a restaurant and slips him a wad of cash, or issues him instructions and shows him like a picture of his wife and kids at home, and like gives him like instructions. What, like, you want to imagine that, you want to envision that, because you want to imagine that this is in the material world. This is the way that this system functions. But the system doesn't necessarily function like that. Particularly with social media, a lot of the
this is the way that this system functions.
Hold on. Andrew, meet Poppy Libs for a second, just so you can get your speaker turned off, Poppy Libs.
Yeah, get your shit together, Andrew.
So with a lot of these,
okay,
perfect.
Your pause up top.
Yeah. So with a lot of these the people who are quote unquote feds are not even conscious of the fact that they're feds, and they're not even getting the benefit of being feds. They're occupying the social role online of being feds. They're doing the labor for the feds. And then
they still have to find a dental clinic. You know, they can't.
Right.
It takes, like, why does it take 4 times for me to get a cleaning? Like, you guys are so slow. I know it costs $5, but like if I'm
one tooth at a time.
I'm not driving 25 minutes to this community college 4 times for a dental cleaning when I could have federal benefits. Are you kidding me? Yeah. It's just like, but like, it's like the guy who's signing up is just like, no, seriously, they're like 100% in on the Taliban shit. Yeah, no, they're retweeting the Taliban. Yeah, I know. Yeah. Nah, the public doesn't even know the difference between Al Qaeda and Taliban. We're yeah. No, that's like 20 years ago, man. Yeah, we already did that. Easy peasy.
Guilty.
Nah, he's gonna keep going to the dental clinic. We do not need to put insurance into this.
Yeah, it's very
it really is tempting. It is tempting. I mean, me too, by the way. But
yeah, and I'm not saying that just because like obviously memeing and trolling like these things aren't. I'm not saying that that you know that's the one more person who retweets the Taliban that they're going to push it over the edge. You know,
right?
Obviously, this is like 50,000 foot view stuff kind of, and it's talking like the forces that are working, that are moving things in various directions. And ultimately, so this is another example of what you're talking about, is this David Hogg tweet. He said, if millions of people can be convinced that the government is controlled by a group of child-eating pedophiles, what's stopping them from being convinced they have an obligation to overthrow their government? We have more guns than people and enough useful idiots to cause a problem. We have more guns than people and enough useful idiots to cause a problem. There you go. There's he just made the shift for you.
Mm-hmm.
to where they're predicting what's going to happen, and so they're acting because it's looking like it's going to happen. And the way that libertarians respond to that is actually overthrowing the government is good. Ha 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 ha.
By the way, if you want your 2A taken away, that's a really, giving them a reason to try. This is what will do it. It's like,
Right.
hey, we have all these guns, and now they try to overthrow the government. This is a perfect reason for us to get rid of it, because obviously this is a problem. Maybe back then, in 1776, it was a good thing for private citizens to have guns so that they could overthrow a tyrannical government. But we're not the tyrants, and we don't need to be overthrown.
Yes.
The real tyrants are. And then
Yeah.
every one of my Facebook friends that I made in the past 2 years is basically just doing PR work for proving that they are in fact the tyrants. I mean, not to me or anyone with like half a brain, but just like, yeah, man, you're doing a lot of photo shoots with scary looking weapons for no reason, it seems.
Yeah. So, I tweeted libertarians publicly actually overthrowing the government is good. Also, libertarians, why do people keep demanding a bigger and stronger government? If you're incentivizing them to, look, what they're seeing is these people see the government as a good thing. It's their friend. It's them. They identify themselves personally with the state. So when you come at them and you say, well, actually, the state needs to be overthrown, you're declaring yourself their enemy. So are you willing to act toward them like you're their enemy? Because they're sure as hell willing to treat you like their enemy. And they're not going to stop with shit posting on the internet. This is the spirit that lends fuel to those sorts of moves ultimately happening. I don't think that the 2A is ever going to go away. If anything, I think that they're going to double down on it. But the definition of who is qualified for it is going to legally change, and ultimately it comes down to enforcement. So, like, people talk about the vaccine passports. And they're like, oh, no, look, this is going to be really bad for black people. It's going to be really bad for homeless people. Ha ha, look, the regime's hurting its own people. You don't think that they're going to...
Oh, God,
you don't think that they're going to selectively enforce the rules? You don't think that there's going to be exceptions for their pets? Of course there is. This is the nature of it. The hypocrisy is the feature. It's not a bug. It's the feature. This regime despises you and your values and everything you stand for. And it will stop at nothing to rub your face in it. You have to get that clear. What's up, Poppy Libs?
Howdy, y'all.
I'm excited that you're here. I love your name on the restream also.
Sorry, Russ.
Yes, it's fantastic. Man, I was wondering if we could kind of like pivot a bit to like outlandish hypothetical solutions.
How outlandish do we want to get?
Jeff Deist tells everybody to move to Alabama. Let's start with that.
Not that outlandish, actually. That's
okay. Okay. I'm gonna keep going.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So Jeff Deist commands everyone to, or offers Jeff Deist, God, what he's just
Freudian slip.
In his gentle manner, just says, hey, Alabama's pretty great. Why doesn't, if you're kind of sick of this nonsense, we're doing some good work here. Phil Bishop is also moving to Alabama, and, he's doing a lot of political work here. So the state legislature is sort of set up for us. And yeah, man, we're just going to try to do our thing here. That's not too outlandish yet.
Nope.
Okay.
Actually, Phil Bishop is he already lives on the border with Alabama. So.
Oh, I like that. Flora Bammer. Maybe that could be a thing. But yeah, like what would it take to, like, we talked about this in the supported listeners group. But what would it take to establish like in Alabama a hospital or two that was like, we're not so worried about certain statuses of certain shots for a lot of medical staff who is adverse to taking certain shots across the country, and maybe we could incentivize them to populate our new Alabama hospitals. our Deistian hospitals. What stands in the way of that?
Are you married to the idea of a hospital or any medical institution whatsoever?
Like something that functions the same way.
Okay, yeah. The first problem with hospitals, but we probably need some other sort of institution. The problem with the hospital is that you actually have to get permission from your competitors to exist, and that's like the first rule of I forget what they're called, but they're aimed for the type of license where basically it's as if you have to go, if you want to be a small business competitor, you have to go to Walmart and Amazon, get their permission to open your small business if you want to be a hospital. And shocker, they don't really give you permission. Your competition doesn't like the certificate of need. There we go.
Yeah.
And that's a big problem. And so the hospital is kind of out the window right from the get go. It's even tougher for billionaires to open them up just for that reason, because the pre-existing hospitals in the area don't like the idea of having more competition, because they like having a monopoly on I'm the only emergency room in the area, and if you call the ambulance, it has to come to me.
Do you see any way around that?
Basically, if you wanted to do a telemedicine service, where you're not, or like telemedicine or a concierge doctor, that would be like a concierge doctor service where you would have to like you can run it centrally, but we move outward that way. And then you would contract with the hospital anytime you wanted to do a inpatient surgery or something like that.
What about if they called it a nightclub that just happened to have a medical staff and a lot of expensive equipment?
You're still subject to HIPAA regulations, and that's going to be an issue.
Okay.
It's like basically this is like the single most cronyist industry on the planet anywhere is the American healthcare system, and they've thought of everything really far in advance. I really took a look at this a while back. I'm like, this thing's a Gordian knot. The only way to really take this thing apart is burn it to the ground. And particularly if you want to deal with Medicare or Medicaid, which is like, I think it's well over half of all medical funding, or something like that for at least that age group and that income group. You're talking like roughly bottom 25% and top third. So, and then everybody else in between. And if you're an insurance company, you have to, basically work with, under these regulations for Medicaid and Medicare. And you put all three of those together, and you're talking like 99% of the all healthcare funding is, basically insurance companies, Medicare or Medicaid. And the latter two are all of the type of that's where most of the regulations come from. And this is it's such a clusterfuck. You just have to burn the system to the ground. There really is no other way to get through it, because these guys have thought of everything. And this is why I say nullification is a big if you want to do anything about healthcare as a libertarian, I would start talking about nullification as say, hey, that's cute that you made all of those rules. We're not abiding by any of them, and we're not going to enforce them, and fuck you.
Yeah,
and
that's what I'm wondering. And because well, I'm just saying there's going to be a bunch of these badass libertarians there. So I mean, that maybe that fuck you would. So it's a nightclub with doctors and a lot of medical equipment, and a lot of dudes with things just kind of hanging out at all times.
Yeah, that's the.
Would that be? Would that be nully? Like how would you get the nullification going?
Nullification going, I would have the law enforcement, the guys with guns. So I wouldn't bother with it. I wouldn't bother at all with the guys who know how to undo all the gunshot wounds and all that. I would go straight to the guys who have the guns. And if I'm the mayor, I'm going to be giving the police a stand down order, and any sort of regulator that comes through, I'm going to say, hey, that regulator, arrest him. We're not doing that, and we're going to arrest him, throw him in a cage, and put charges on him, and just even if they don't stick, they may get thrown out in court.
Man, I know that Jeff Dice has a little soft spot in his heart for my friend Matthew. So I don't know. Maybe Matthew can make an appeal to Jeff Dice to get the ball rolling with this.
What's this?
Matthew,
What?
we're saving the country, Matthew.
Oh, okay.
You'll have to go back and
Whatever
listen.
you say. Show me where to sign.
You'll have to go back.
Another easy way would be to say that, hey, we're going to pass a local ordinance that says that if you want to accept HSA or insurance funding or something like that, then you must have a special system or a special system in place for dealing with unvaccinated people, and cut them off right there at the money source. That would be my first place of attack, and they'll probably sue you in court, but there's quite a few that even if they get that thrown out, I can revise that multiple different ways and just keep bleeding them. And I would say, hey, do it my way, or I'm going to keep bleeding you. And you can just bully them into it the way the left does.
Okay.
Which means you need deep pockets. You need to have somebody with deep pockets who's bankrolling.
No. The way I would do that is with the local government and use taxpayer dollars to fund that lawsuit.
Oh, so you're talking about if you already had control of the local government.
Of a local government, just pass an ordinance,
right,
and that will get popular support pretty much immediately in any red area. So, and when I say, and when they come in and sue me, and I need to say, hey, I need to raise a special tax to fight this lawsuit so we can keep access to our healthcare coverage, the people will be like, right on, keep it up. Here's my money. And there's always when you're dealing with government power, it's always three kind of modes of attack that you can use. As like one is like bribery, blackmail, and bullying, and so those are like the main three weapons that they have against you. And one, they can pay you, that's bribery. Or they can say, or this terrible consequence is going to happen to you. This is like more like explicit kind of bullying, and then there's the more implicit kind of bullying that they can do, and you have access to all three of those kinds of weapons, and you can mix and match each and every one of them. So I can, if I want to implicit bully the hospital or the healthcare service providers, I would start talking about here's my list, my laundry list of horrible ideas that AOC came up with, and I'm happy to make every last one of them apply to you if you don't treat these patients who are unvaccinated. And kind of what they're doing with Facebook right now. Hey, if you don't censor all these people, these right wingers and these dissidents and these libertarians, then we're going to have this laundry. We'll probably repeal Section 230 and cause you all these other problems. And my solution to that is kind of the same thing. As I would just straight up put a tax on acts of censorship. So anytime they censor someone, anytime they unperson someone, these are going to be taxable acts. And the Supreme Court has held repeatedly that the act of taxation, by a government is virtually unlimited power. So either the Supreme Court's going to have to overturn quite a few cases of you can't tax that. There's a lot, and they don't really want to do that because it's in the state's interest to always be able to raise any kind of tax for any reason. That's why when Obamacare came through, they said it's a tax because the tax power is virtually unlimited. So that would be the way I would go through with that, where it's like, okay, if you deny service to an unvaccinated person, well, I'm going to put a tax on you for that, and it's going to be a stiff one.
Basically making censorship a sin. It's a sin tax.
That's
exactly what it is.
Yeah, and if you get it wrong, it's a syntax error. There's a couple comments and sort of like what I was thinking like too, but it's talking about how basically the actual definition of insurance being like people like pooling their money, because you imagine that there'd be a certain amount of people who would be fine with paying X amount of dollars per month on behalf of the community. And there's another comment in there kind of talking about kind of like going the other way, like towards like single payer, where almost like it would be like sort of a government, like you're doing that through the government, like creating like an insurance structure like that.
I was just thinking that it's really funny that the people that are ultimately going to be pushing laws like that you have to be vaccinated to be able to get treatment at a hospital, those are the people who were just a few years ago pushing for universal health care. So you see the irony that comes around here. So now when you try to argue that healthcare is a human right, you have just now entered onto their territory. When you say you can't make healthcare vaccine contingent, healthcare is a human right, you've already lost that battle.
Yeah.
Because that was never the source of the debate in the first place. It was always a false argument. Even if the people who were using the healthcare as a human right argument, even if they believed it, they were just pawns of larger interests. They weren't smart enough to understand those larger interests.
Well, wait. Hold up. This is important because I think I have one that solves it. What about my body, my choice, guys? What about that? Because I thought that's what it was. Checkmate.
Oh,
God, you won.
Can we move on to education now?
Oh, education's an easy one to solve.
Okay. All right. Tell me if this is too pie in the sky. It seemed to me at some point, maybe around election time or something like that, there was like a real big. People felt sort of disenfranchised, and people wanted to sort of get away from any kind of influence of like a shadowy cabal, as it may affect their children. In the ideas that would be presented to them. Of course, like during COVID, a lot of people were doing homeschooling, and so they were used to that. What's stopping someone even remotely brilliant from coming up with like the sort of, I don't know if it needs to be statewide or like national. Here you go. Here's the curriculum, K through 12, or what have you. You're going to need kind of a motivated kid. We've got some tutors, we've got some teachers, we've got supplemental material, we've got Zoom meetings every Wednesday, after school hours. But this is a curriculum that will prepare your K through 12 child in order to just for the rest of whatever K through 12 is supposed to do, but without all the bullshit. It seemed like there would be like a market for that among.
You mean the Ron Paul homeschool?
Well, okay, so
my exact thought with that was, it's nice that we have this, we libertarians, we have this liberty lovers, we have this instinct, which I think you just kind of showed a little bit, where it's like, oh, we can do our own thing somewhere else, and the left, of course, as you know, does not really believe in that. They do not believe in live and let live. Like, this is explicitly not their thing. And they straight up tell you, we don't believe in it. And so right off the bat, and Yarvin said this in his most recent article on Gray Mirror about how to rule the libs, is that anytime you have this exit instinct, it's like, that's not going to work. Because like the whole reason you have to exit is like the whole reason like that exit's not going to work, so my exact thought for what to do about education is, okay, if they want to use the public schools to indoctrinate people, who can play that game? And and I would get them to do the exit and abolition, because it's a Tom Sawyer idea where, isn't this fun? And I would basically Tom Sawyer them into doing it. Make the left be the ones to do it, make them be the ones to leave. And the way I would do that is, hey, there's that Ron Paul homeschool curriculum. We're about to make that the Ron Paul public school curriculum. And by the way, here's your first textbook on we're going to start teaching socialism in public schools, and the textbook is Socialism by Mises.
I like this.
Here's it, and this is, by the way, very simple to do. It's like, hey, we're having a vote on the curriculum. This is it, and I just hostile take over the one school district somewhere, and maybe get a Republican or two on board with it to say, hey, this is an anti-communist agenda. By anti-communist, I mean anything to the left of Joe Manchin. And so, and we're going to be teaching this in public schools instead. And
It's like
so
if you're going to do the time, you might as well do the crime. If you're going to be characterized as people who are trying to do this, then do it and get the benefits of it. Don't just pay the price for it.
and I would
Let me
sweeten
throw
the
this
deal.
at you before I take off, and I'll listen as I'm driving and such. But so let me throw this back. I do agree with the notion of exit being like being like
This is
a
not gonna work.
real thing. Yeah. So all right. If I hear Yarvin you may or may not know, I've had lunch with the guy, so I've heard him. You know, he also referenced in another one. In all
I
seriousness,
heard you two are fellow philosophers together.
yes, two men of similar ilk exchanging ideas. He referenced the futility of trying to.
Alex, did you?
Did you not for nothing? Did you notice that his productivity on that fucking blog went up after we met for lunch? I mean, is that a fucking coincidence?
He really needed some philosophizing in his life, and Steven
The
provided
proofs
it.
in the fuck. Check your goddamn email. They're in there. Boy, are they in there. I mean, replies to my personal email are not in there, but you know, he's busy writing a blog. It's not a big deal.
He's just going to reply all at once, you know.
Yeah. It's we know who he's talking to. No, but seriously, he had kind of also talked, I think maybe on the same show or recently, about the futility of trying to take over school boards and how the infrastructure, you know, you don't have the power to the typical shit. So basically, I'm trying to reconcile two things: how to provide alternatives, like because like my feeling behind that idea was just like, let's provide an educational alternative to these people who hate it, you know, not necessarily. I guess it's inherently exit. But it's just like we're always talking about, we have to be able to provide alternatives and, you know, build stuff. And that's kind of like where I'm coming from. How do you build stuff without making it look like exit? And if he kind of says that there's futility in the school board route or whatever, what's your plan for dealing?
I mean,
with
as
that?
someone who's campaigned before, I would disagree with him that the school board route is not going to work. That is a completely undefended election. You could walk right in with a little bit, with, you know, a new pair of sneakers. You buy yourself a new pair of sneakers. That's about the investment you're going to need to just go knock on the doors and say, hey, these guys are communists. I'm not. Let's get this. Let's you know, move this thing down start moving some more right wing ideas down the road. And, you know, most Republicans that, you know, they are kind of, you know, in PCs, but they recognize good ideas. And if you say that, we're going to be strong you elect me and we're going to be putting in a strong anti-communist curriculum there, and they'll be right there. And they know what to do, because again, elections are a feedback loop, you know, or I should say callback routine, where they have this programming in them already to be anti-socialist or whatever. And, you know, what they need is someone to say, hi, I'm that anti-socialist. You're supposed to vote for me. That's exactly it. And so I disagree with Yarvin that route is not doable. And that one's a very, very easy election to win, particularly if you look at the numbers. There's such a
So
small...
in conclusion, before I dip out of here, what we're saying is that calls to protest are effectively useless for advancing our interests. You're going to go more in depth in that on Liberty Lockdown tonight at what time?
8 p.m. Eastern.
8 p.m. Eastern. And that Jeff Deist having everyone move to Alabama and maybe Northern Florida. What's up, though? Those are far more productive avenues.
Yes, it is. And I would add that to, hey, if you want to be a libertarian and actually, you know, do an effective protest, a much easier way to do that is if you already have a power as a city councilman or a mayor. And then their protest means shit. And so if you're the one who says, all right, here's my protest, we're not enforcing any of your goddamn laws. It's like, have fun. And remember I forget who said it, but it's like the ATF does not have enough of a budget to bust all of the pot dispensaries in LA. It's like, that's how limited their, you know, the federal government's capabilities are, and we're giving them far, far, far too much credit for being able to actually enforce their will. And they rely so heavily on cooperation from the local government. It basically is the honor system. And if you're one of those libertarians who's like, well, honor sucks, we're not doing that. then okay, they can't rely on you and they're fucked. Yeah, basically, because it's too much of a cost for them. And if libertarians don't really need to move anywhere, they just need to take the local governments, because there's more than enough of us, way more than enough of us to, even like 1% of libertarians is enough to take over basically all of the just straight up hostile takeover all of the local government offices that we're going to need, from school board to mayors to city council. Unless you're in a deep blue area, and that's like the only exception is if you're in a deep blue area, it's probably not going to work. But that would be the way I would go about doing it. Is instead of moving, that you should move if you're in a blue state. Because
I'm in the research triangle.
Yeah, if you're in the research triangle, shush.
Yep. In fact, I've got to head there right now. I love you, boys. I'll be listening.
Yeah.
See you, buddy.
See you, bro. But yeah, if you're in the research triangle, and Alabama is a great state, and I could not recommend it more. Bay Area, where its though is, that's a great area. See, basically, it really only takes one. Because remember, Republicans are all hierarchical. They're all right wingers are all hierarchical. So if you're the boss, they're just like, oh, he's the boss. We're going to do what he says. Like, you don't need to convince them. Just like, hi, I'm the boss. We're doing it. And they're like, yeah, okay, you're the boss. We're doing it. We get it.
Just hack into their existing programming.
Works. So it's like, you don't need to convince them all that you're right. You need to convince them you're the boss and you're doing it. And that's just a matter of getting, a local election. And those are so easy to win because they're such unguarded. Usually these offices are held by like kind of old people who just want to do the right thing. They have a very vague notion of civic responsibility, and these aren't leftists who like have a love for power. That's not what these guys are. And they're not going to work hard for it either. So if you're a young guy with a little bit of extra energy and a new pair of shoes that they can just campaign with, you'll win. And it's not even going to be hard. They're like, you don't need money. You just need like, okay, $200 is a really not decent pair of walking shoes. That's about what it takes.
I'm guessing that the reason that Yarvin reacted the way that, or the reason he makes the case he does, is because he's probably he spent basically his entire life in like either in his parents, I think both were part of the State Department, so he was like a State Department kid, and then he's grown up and he lives in the Bay Area, so he's in like deeply like within the regime. But if you get out into basically anywhere outside of the deepest blue areas, anywhere where it's mostly just kind of like 60-40 one way or the other, or even if it's deep red, those are places that are very, very ripe for takeover.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up in the orange groves of Central Florida, and it's like literally I walked out my backyard on one side was a golf course and the other side is orange groves. And so it's like suburbia, like very exurbia. And it's like, in my place, it was Lake County, Florida. And it was like that, my town council was, all 5 of them were like hardcore Reagan Republicans. And again, they're the old people type who don't really know much. They just know, okay, we're supposed to be a responsible, limited government. And like, that's about the superficial depth they go into. And they're older folks who aren't going to go out and knock on doors. It's like, they just don't have the energy for it because they're like in their 60s. So you go and take it from them basically, and they're not gonna fight you for it.
So here's my question with this kind of thing. So given that this strategy can be such an effective way to push back on the encroaching regime, so to speak, how do you scale this without both, like, so how do you bridge let me lay a little bit of groundwork for this question here real quick. So one thing that I think is an accurate criticism of libertarians is that they're trying to save the world when they should just be trying to save their own community. So they're trying to look for a strategy that they can immediately apply universally. Again, this is the little d Democrat in them. They're looking for a strategy that's immediately has universal applicability when they could just focus on saving their own community. At the same time, strategies do need to scale. So how do you scale this from, how do you get through the that in between section where you go from a small player to a major player without triggering the defense apparatus?
Well, what you do you don't announce it for one.
Right.
So it's like you can announce it to your own people, but you don't like go on national television or a very large podcast and say, oh, by the way, we're not doing this. Okay, so don't do that. That's like step one is don't tell the enemy the plan on the podcast. So I have two rules for,
and that's the end of your answer.
Yeah, 2 rules for libertarian radicals is one, step if you're a radical, shut the fuck up about being a radical. You're not a radical, you're a moderate. It's your opponents who are the real radicals. That's
yes.
right. Good.
Yes.
And step 2, don't tell the enemy the plan on a podcast. So it's like, okay, if they know the plan, they know how to get you.
And step 3,
don't tell them the plan.
And step 3, if any part of the plan requires you to go onto major national platforms and sell your message, reconsider the plan.
Yeah, very much reconsider that plan. That's not going to work. Okay.
The plan should not depend on your ability to message from CNN.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you are depending on waking people up and the people doing the hard work and the heavy lifting for you, you're barking up the wrong tree, man. That's not going to work.
Yes.
I can tell you right now that plan is doomed for failure. And the idea needs to be to consist of you doing all the hard work for the people.
Yes.
And them showing up to maybe vote for you, like maybe, that's a big maybe. Preferably more but you need to be the one that the plan rests basically entirely on. And if you take that attitude of, hey, we are taking over these councils, and just keep track of how much you can actually do, and if you start doing them all at once, basically, if let's say you took over 150 of these councils and you only made like kind of minor changes quietly, and then you woke up one day, it's like, there's 150 of us small municipalities, and together we're ruling over basically 5 to 10 million people or something like that, because that's about what that is. I would just say, announce collectively as like a covenant. By the way, we're not doing any of this, federal bullshit, because they're in an illegitimate regime. And I would make that my excuses, for at least the next 2 or 3 years that Biden has left, is that he's not an illegitimate president. So we're not going to enforce any of the laws. I don't care if they're laws I agreed with, I'm not enforcing any of them. So fuck you, because he's not he's an illegitimate president. So I'm not doing any of them. And that's my go-to excuse for all of it. And if you have 150 of them doing it at once, they don't know who to attack. They might get one of you, but there's still 149 others that they didn't get. And even and then you think about how are they going to get you? It's like, okay, I mean, they might come in and make an example out of your town, and that's going to consist of them, having their own heavy-handed enforcement. And there's so many ways you can use that against them and turn that back around. And because now we have cell phones, and if I were there, I would get like a crowd. If I were the mayor, I'd get a crowd of people, and we would just follow the people around with cell phones and picket signs, and just making sure. And if they're going door to door, I'm going to follow them door to door and just shout at them from behind them, so that the people who are answering the door are like, nah, I'm not doing it. I think you're outnumbered here, buddy. And that's exactly how I do that. And there's so many easy ways to get around that, and they really are powerless as long as they can't count on your police. Because basically they have to ask your police for permission, and if you explicitly deny that to them, they're basically powerless. And there's a lot of if you can just take the local reins of power and you just take over the local guns, the legitimate legal guns, it's that's all you need. And there's a whole lot of just easy ways to get that going. And so you don't really need it fully to scale. You just don't. And because remember, 1% of libertarians is enough to really pull this off, because there aren't that many actual seats that we really need to take over. And once you start getting, and by the way, once you beat them back the first time and you show how it's done, it's at that point you will go viral, and every libertarian will start doing that, automatically, because they see, they can be beaten. And
latent within this is the reason why the GOP is the only place, is the only institution that you could use to do something like this, because it has the existing infrastructure and
It has the
it
hierarchical
has
mindset.
it has the hierarchical mindset, which which is a subset of the fact that it has the people who are there already of the mindset to support you and agree with you. You're not
Yeah.
having to convert people, and then there's not multiple steps to the process. It's like Jason Stapleton always says, as a principle of marketing, that you have to enter the conversation people are already having in their head. You don't, if you're trying to get them to think your thoughts, you're going to lose. This is where libertarians' empathy problem is really letting them down.
Yeah.
Because they're trying to get people to see the world through their eyes rather than accepting people seeing the world through the eyes they see it through and leveraging them into working for you. Yeah.
Go ahead. Well, I mean, this is why I like the name of your show so much, is that, I mean, like king pilled, basically they need a fucking king. Give them a king.
Yes.
And like, understand, like, because they've made it to the point where they're like, okay, we need 10,000 Liechtensteins. But then they don't go and connect that to, okay, well, we're going to need 10,000 kings for those 10,000 Liechtensteins. There should be a really, really obvious connection.
Right.
And, like, you don't need to get them to agree with you. You just need to be like, I'm the king. We're doing it. And they're like, yeah, okay, we're doing it, I guess. And that's it. That's all the convincing you need. Is just get to the point where you have that power. And 10,000, and that's easy to do because we have more than enough libertarians to fill 10,000 ANCAP monarchies. I mean, the king of Liechtenstein is an ANCAP.
Yes.
Like, we have more than enough of those.
Yeah.
And you just get one of those guys in charge, and he says, we're not enforcing that law. And they're like, okay, I guess we're not enforcing the law. That's all the convincing they need, is he's the boss. That's the convincing. Done. Like, that's all.
See, the reason why.
By the way, if you have the Libertarian Party that you want to use as a vehicle for doing this, is exactly the wrong vehicle for that. It says, all right, I'm the king, we're doing this. Like, let's debate this. Now, we need to have a conversation first and agree on ideals.
Point of order.
Point of order.
So what's funny is you bring up the idea of 10,000 Liechtensteins, and I can already hear the libertarians who you would present them the opportunity to live in Liechtenstein, and they would have a problem with the fact that there's still people voting. There's still people that vote on stuff. They have direct democracy, because half of the Liechtensteinian government is a direct democracy. Because you're not going to get rid of that dynamic, but they're not the ones who control the game. It's a way of the people who have the assets, the people who control the system. It's a way of them understanding what their constituents want. At any point, either side can change the other. So there's a tension that's there. I don't think that Liechtenstein is the ideal government, obviously, but I think that it's a hell of a lot closer. It's very, very close, and it's vastly preferable to what we have right now. This was one of the first really big red pills for me. The first time I really started thinking about, I got the question popped into my head, and I just couldn't get rid of it. It was, if I had the opportunity to choose between the government that I have right now and another government that's not my ideal government, but is better than the one that I have right now, which one would I choose? Obviously, I would choose the one that's better.
Yeah.
And this seems like a really obvious basic point, but what that means is that you are making the choice for this form of government. You have to consciously choose that form of government. You can't just passively accept it. You have to consciously choose that. Once you get that, then you consciously choose the next one. But you have to be willing to accept a specific form of government now, and then so that you can use it. You have to accept it first so that you can use it and leverage it into something more. That once that got through my brain, I realized that the anarcho-capitalist philosophical position is like a starting point, but it's like a suit, or it's like a skin that you have to wear, but you have to fill it with a body. There has to be something that's in there that actually accords to the real life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if you want to, by the way, if you want to move people towards being an ANCAP, the easiest way to do that is by showing them that if you want to get power, be an ANCAP. And
Yes.
so, having an ANCAP in charge is a much quicker way of convincing people to become ANCAPs, because people, they always mimic the elites, and that starts at the ground level, at the local level. So if you have like 1/3 of the Republican coalition of local governments and city councilmen and mayors are ANCAPs, which by the way we have more than enough of that to fill that. It's like, people are going to be like, oh, ANCAP is an ideology that gets power. I should go do that.
Yes.
And because they mimic the elites. It's always the culture. It's always the elite culture that gets mimicked, and it's never the other way around. So, by the way, and if it is, those aren't elites. If the elites are mimicking the plebs, those aren't elites, and they're going to get filtered out.
They'll do it. Sometimes they'll do it. Like if you see elites who look like they're mimicking the plebs, they're co-opting the plebs. They're not actually mimicking them. There's a difference there. They're co-opting them. They're using them because, particularly in the system that we live in right now, there's status to be found in victimhood. So they're finding token victims that they can co-opt, that they can use. So it's not an inversion of the process. It's taking it to a deeper level. Ultimately, the elites always drive the society, but their values that they use to drive the society, they pluck from the fringes. The fringes are ultimately what will determine the culture of the future, but that process is intermediated by the elites, and those elites are always going to exist. That's a Machiavellian political science premise. I wanted to address real quick here. I've a Twitter thread I did this week that I wanted to run through here before we wrap up. But before that, I wanted to address again, just related to what we were talking about earlier about violence and protests and the utility of getting to the step of working toward or moving toward violence, and people who are kind of escalating their rhetoric toward that end. And someone had replied to the thread that I'm going to go through here in a minute. He replied to it and he said that that there are people going on tirades on Facebook about how the unvaccinated might kill their children, and they're absolutely getting to the point of violence. And so if the plebs are starting to get to the point of violence, I see a lot of people frame this as this is a step, like people are finally ready to start taking action. People are finally ready to start doing something. And they see that as like a white pill. So that's why this thing like breaking through the lines in Australia and overwhelming the police, like that's a white pill. This is like, oh, we're fighting back. We're winning. And this is what I tweeted. I said, the plebs getting to the point of violence is not a good thing. If the plebs escalate to violence, they only expand the possible scope of the regime crackdown. Because the premise of the regime is that it exists at the border between violence and nonviolence, that it mediates that process. That's where the regime lives. The more violent you get, the more violent it can get. So if you're going to engage in violence, you had better win in one shot, because you're not going to get a second shot. This is the principle of if you what is it, if you aim for the king, you better not miss.
Yeah.
This is that principle. So engaging in violence against the regime that doesn't topple the regime is functionally indistinguishable from working for the regime.
Bingo. Basically, as long as they're able to, be the ones who are saying, "Hey, we're extracting order. We represent order." It's like they're always going to be they're always going to have more power than you, and they're always going to win. Basically, what you need to be doing is to saying, "Hey, we're the ones restoring order. They're the ones causing the chaos, and you need to make them work in reverse." And because anytime you have, chaos like this, like if I were a mayor, I would take one look at that riot and say, this is, the reason that this riot is happening is because these guys were irresponsible with their public policy, and the price for restoring order should be to give more power to me, not to them. And you elect me, I'm going to restore order, and make sure that these sorts of riots, don't happen because of provocative and inflammatory public policy. Provocative, inflammatory. It's two nice little words that say they're the enemy, they're the chaos, I'm order, and I'm the ANCAP, and I represent order, and that like you need to be the one making archotropism work for you. Because again, anytime you have chaos out there, that means shortage of order. And that's why, and then the price for restoring order is always more power. That's where that, you're not paying them in money to restore order, you're paying them in power to restore order. And every time, by the way, they never give that power back. So this is a way that them just stepping up. Is chaos means there's a shortage. You pay me in power to restore order, and then I cause chaos again to get you to pay me in more power. And so step. It's all economics. All of archotropism is economics, but the fact it so resembles thermodynamics was what kind of cued me into it. The first time around, because I got 1 and 2 described basically just by myself. And then Dave Smith basically gave me the third one when he started talking about Hoppe and Democracy of the God That Failed. And that kind of cued me into, I just started seeing it. Oh, this is thermodynamics. And so then I got 4, 5, and 6 just right off the bat, just like that. But 1 and 2 were what I basically just started with. I named them in the order they came in. So, but basically it's all economics. And it just happened. It just to very coincidentally mimic thermodynamics, which is very interesting.
The economics of power. Yeah, ultimately, that's the point is that your goal, if you're wanting to diminish the negative influence of the state, that means you're needing to take power away from it. And so then, if you approach it like scientifically, the best way to take power away from it is to give power to something that's better at holding it. That's going to be the only way that you're going to hold on to it. Right. And so that mechanism is always going to be an order creation device. This is why Trump was so successful, why he appealed to people so much, because he attacked the regime from the perspective of incompetence and chaos. And he said, we need someone who's competent and will provide order, will get things back in order. That was the role that he was, the messaging that he was sending. In a sense, Ron Paul had a very similar frame to his message as well. The whole message of blowback was all about this regime is reckless. This regime is putting your life at risk with how reckless and chaotic and incompetent it's being over here. That's what connected with people on a biological level. So it wasn't conversations of liberty. It wasn't principles of liberty or people wanting to be free. It was the fact that Ron Paul's messaging indicated somebody who's capable of protecting people from violent, chaotic people. And then Trump had the bombacity with him and the alpha and all the wealth to go with it. That whole framing lent even more weight to his message.
Yeah, he had that strongman demeanor. And Ron Paul didn't. He was 77. So
right. That's ultimately why that and money. Those are the reasons why Trump succeeded where Ron Paul failed.
Ron Paul could have won without the money. He was too old. He didn't fit the strong man. Because he's old and white hair. He looked frail, and it's like you can't make a strong man out of that. And you need someone who looks the part of a strong man. And Trump just did.
Ultimately, the what I was getting at with the money part is that he got outmaneuvered politically. He got outmaneuvered by the party. The party managed to bully him out. And they weren't able to do the same thing with Trump. Part of that was because Trump was so compelling to people, but it was also because he had the resources to bully his way in there, and Ron Paul didn't. So they're both, they kind of go together.
Yeah, Trump would campaign with his 747 right behind him.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like he looks the part.
Right.
Of a brash businessman who was like, take no prisoners.
Nope. I think you froze up. Let me get to this. We're coming up on 2 hours here, so let me run through this thread here real quick, just to kind of. It gets into the. I'm kind of predicting the future here a little bit, but I'm mostly just describing I'm describing the nature of the archetypes, kind of with what's happening right now. So I'm going. Oh, here he is. He's back.
Shoot.
Can you hear me?
I think we're good.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're good.
Okay, cool. I'm going to pull up the screen share here and share the tab. And the tab is this one. There. Okay. So now I will zoom it in so you can read it. All right. So this story, this same type of story has been going around a lot lately. Vaccinated man dies in Florida. Daughters share their anger and urge people to get vaccinated. At this point, everyone is very, very clear that this is obvious propaganda, that this is just so transparent. This is one of the things that maybe is a little encouraging to me, kind of, because this is the sort of thing that really makes a difference, I think. The fact that people are able to recognize that this is bullshit. I think that is starting to affect some change. Not that it's going to fix the system, but that it's going to induce more people to remove themselves from the system. I think at first we're going to get kind of like an extinction burst where people first they get really, really into it, and then they're like, "Oh, this is hopeless. Screw it, I'm out." And all the energy will be kind of absorbed and sucked away from the system. So the faster that people can withdraw themselves from the system, the better. That would be ideal. But we're going to have to go through this extinction burst where people invest more in it and do things like try to take over political parties to try to change. Yeah, anyway, so I said that the reason that the clear purpose of stories like this one is to teach people through repetition that unvaccinated people, and I put that in quotes for a reason, unvaccinated people are responsible for the deaths of vaccinated, again in quotes, vaccinated people. The reason I'm doing that is because I'm calling into question that label, because that label doesn't necessarily mean what a lot of people think it means in the use that I'm using it here. So next tweet. So I said first, who would want people to think unvaccinated people are responsible for the deaths of vaccinated people? The obvious answer would be whomever is actually responsible for the deaths of vaccinated people. So if vaccinated people, quote unquote, are dying from COVID, someone needs to be held responsible for this. Someone needs to be blamed for that. Someone that death needs to be placed at the feet of someone. That would be why you would want to say these are the people who are responsible for it. This seems kind of obvious, but I'm making sure that point is explicit. So next, so that's your incentive. Your incentive is that whoever is responsible for vaccinated people dying from COVID is trying to offload that blame to someone else. So how are they doing that? Well, this also demonstrates the role of the press institutions. They're someone's mouthpiece. They are narrative launderers for hire. So who's employing them? This is the role of the press. The role of the press is laundering a narrative for the highest bidder. Someone will come pay them, say, run this story. And then there's some people that pay them to run this story so many times that they've just developed kind of a general relationship that when we want to run a story, we'll wait to see what you have to say about it, and we'll run the story that you want us to. And in fact, we've been thinking about this the same way for so long that I don't even have to consult you anymore. I know exactly how you want the story to be run, so I'll just run it that way. Because I've been living in this world for so long that I've come to actually believe that is the way that things are. This is the way that the press functions, and how the press turns out to be a mouthpiece for these institutions of wealth and power without it necessarily having to be explicitly coordinated as a conscious conspiracy. And sometimes it even is. So finally, with these pieces together, you should be able to make out the nature of the next move. So people who are responsible for the deaths of others are called murderers. That's what we call them, murderers. And the process of establishing someone as a murderer is called a prosecution. So what we're watching is the process of someone being established as a murderer. We're watching a process of a prosecution. This is a legal proceeding. What we're seeing is the spirit of a legal proceeding happening through the court of public opinion. Once it's formally established that, quote unquote, unvaccinated people are responsible for the deaths of, quote unquote, vaccinated people, there are two important questions to answer. The first one is, what constitutes a, quote unquote, unvaccinated or vaccinated person? So what is it for someone to qualify as vaccinated? What does that mean? What sort of things must have happened, or what sort of conditions must be met for somebody to be considered a vaccinated person? The second one is, what constitutes the thing we call the death of a quote unquote vaccinated person as far as the legal culpability of the unvaccinated is concerned. So if we're going to define, legally speaking, the death of someone who's called a vaccinated person, what conditions must be met? What is that? Have they received a specific pharmaceutical delivery experience? Have they received multiples? You know, what constitutes is one? Does that count as quote unquote vaccinated? Or is it 3? Or is it a running number? You know, you see, like it's kind of a little bit vague. You can just say vaccinated, and people just kind of conjure up an image of what a vaccinated person is. But clearly that definition is in flux. We'll say that. And Venermani has made the case very effectively that you shouldn't, try not to violate the terms here, that you shouldn't call the word that because it isn't that. It's different in the way that it functions.
Don't accept
that it does do.
Don't accept their assumptions.
Right.
Refusing to accept the premise.
Exactly. There's an element of that here. So they're using that term very loosely, and they're kind of it's hovering around looking for a definition. Meanwhile, people are getting angrier and angrier at whatever an unvaccinated person is. Ultimately, that definition will be landed upon. It'll be settled, and people will be directed toward them as you are the source. These people here are the source of all of your problems. If you want to solve your problems, if you want to go back to normal, you need to eliminate this group of people. And that group of people can be redefined at any moment. We can redefine it and point this target at anybody at any time. So you better make sure you don't wind up meeting that categorization. This term that's constantly in flux, that's constantly being updated. You better make sure that you don't cross into that. Because if you do, you may be the one that gets the Eye of Sauron. You see this? This is a mind control weapon that's being employed. And it's being employed by a spiritual power, like a spiritual essence is moving it through multiple people. So these two questions: what constitutes the vaccinated person and unvaccinated? And what does it mean if a vaccinated person dies? How do we determine that they died? You know, is it they died in a car accident? Is that considered a death of a vaccinated person?
They died with COVID.
Right, exactly. So this is a little bit loose as well. If we're going to be counting statistics, because that's what all this is. Ultimately, all of this is creating a binary on a spreadsheet. It's just creating a yes and no, and pushing people into one and into the other. But what defines that, what the yes and the no is for, moves. It evolves. It moves around and is constantly in flux. So if we're going to accumulate this and we're going to say this many deaths of vaccinated people, and these people were killed by XYZ, you know, the unvaccinated people, this is the legal justification for us taking action against that group of people. Here is the legal case. They have killed this many vaccinated people. Therefore, this action is justified. When do we cross to that point? What is that line at? That's what's moving around. That's what the whole system is trying to settle on right now, because that's when the rubber meets the road. So both of these questions are going to be answered by the science. Ultimately, we will appeal to the science to determine this answer. The expert witness on those issues is being heard right now in the court of public opinion. The problem is, the court of public opinion only conducts show trials. It doesn't conduct actual trials, it conducts show trials. So the expert witness in this case is journalists and fact checkers. They are oracles of the truth, delivering to us the messages of the high priests of the science in order to combat misinformation from those who seek to corrupt our sacred court. This is the journalists and fact checkers that are covering every story on Twitter. What they're doing is they're preserving the sanctity of the court. You can't get misinformation in here. This court is what determines everything in our society. So misinformation brought into it corrupts the nature of every decision anyone makes. We need to achieve the status of absolute enlightenment where we never make a wrong decision and nobody ever dies. Any stain or corruption on this system is pushing that event back and actively killing people today. This is the thing that's being sorted out in the court of public opinion. And the people who will ultimately weigh on the relevant details that will make the conclusion obvious. No one person's going to make the conclusion. It's going to be obvious to everyone. Once all of the experts, all the high priests have come forth and answered on each little point that they're qualified to speak to. You know, they're not qualified to speak to every possible detail. They just have their own little part of the picture that they all put together. So nobody's actually responsible for one thing. Everyone's all responsible for everything. Because this is a show trial, if you honestly argue the merits of the case using charts and graphs to try to prove that the unvaccinated aren't responsible for the deaths of the vaccinated, you're taking the bait. You're just lending a veneer of legitimacy to what is very plainly a phony process. When you engage in good faith in these conversations with people, publicly especially, you're making it, you are saying implicitly that this trial that's being conducted is legitimate and we should trust the results. That's the idea that you convey when you engage in this conversation. The results are predetermined. We already know where this is going. We know what's going to happen. We know how this is going to play out. The details are the question. Where the details exactly land is the question, but we know where it's going. We know how this sort of thing ends. So, last point. What's the purpose of a show trial? It's obviously to justify whatever comes next. When a mob wants to hang a man, if they want to pretend that it's not a cold-blooded lynch mob, they hold a trial to prove the hanging was justified. Ultimately, vaccinated is an arbitrary status determined by experts, which serves as proxy for who is compliant with the regime. Those who are unvaccinated are those who are out of compliance. And we're watching out of compliance made equivalent with murderer. And then I said, note, the actual organs of the government proper are mere enforcement mechanisms for the conclusions of the court of public opinion. That's the idea that I want more people to grapple with, to wrestle with. That the actual institutions of the state itself are downstream from the rest of this process. So they have effectively no impact on the conclusions of the court because the court exists upstream from them. The court of public opinion, this show trial, is considered the oracle from on high, and the rest of these institutions are just following what seems obvious to everyone. This became most clear to me with the way the Supreme Court handled the big lawsuit.
Which
when
one?
that happened, the Texas lawsuit.
Oh yes, back during the election, yeah.
When that happened, when the Supreme Court was like, "Listen, man, we rubber stamp shit here. You know, don't get us into deciding that kind of outcome. That's not our job. That sort of outcome is determined elsewhere. We're going to do our job. You do your job. Let's move the process forward here." That's when it became very clear to me the way that this whole system functions. That these state institutions, their responsibility is to be responsive to their constituency, but they're not the actual will of their constituency, but to what's in the best interests of their constituency. And what is determined as what their best interests begins with the court of public opinion. What's the obvious beliefs that everyone is expected to have. And all of those beliefs are all populated and seeded and put into place through what we've termed the science. The unelected bureaucratic academics, this what Yarvin calls the cathedral. That body is what determines the conclusions of the court of public opinion. So the actual opinions of the people, it doesn't flow upward. It flows down. When people assert their opinion, they're reflecting something that was given to them from on high, and they're echoing it back. Like, what did you call it? You called it a
Callback
call and
routine.
response. What is it?
Yeah, callback routine.
Yeah, callback routine.
That's your term, actually.
Right.
Got
Yeah.
that from you.
Oh, did it? Oh, okay. Well, look how
Yeah.
smart I am. So when you look at this whole process, if your thought with this process is, well, the state are the ones that are responsible for all this. The government proper, the actual institutions themselves, with rare exceptions that prove the rule, are passengers on this ride. They just exist as red tape, as a rubber stamping institution for the stuff that's already been decided, it's already been determined. The people who control the zeitgeist are the ones that determine what's going to be determined. And then the debate is just kind of for show. It's just to make it seem like there's a two-party thing going on here, when it's very clearly a single institution, not a single institution, but it's very clearly a single entity, a one-party state in effect. So the TLDR for all of this is, if you wanted to just fast forward to this point, the vaccination is the marker of compliance with the regime. What constitutes vaccinated is dictated by experts of the regime, and we're in a mock trial that concludes by identifying those possessing the status of unvaccinated as murderous traitors to the regime.
This is something, I mean, they kind of, foreshadowed this when they were saying, hey, the people who are most likely to commit terrorism are those who are skeptical of vaccines.
Exactly.
And they question the vaccine narrative. And, I think they'll probably go with the, terrorist, name call for, how they convince people that, hey, these, people need to be rounded up. And it's either going to be they need to be rounded up or they need to become vaccinated. Because the idea that they're going to put the unvaccinated people or sequester them and put them in the camps, I don't think they're going to be able to pull that one off. I think what much more likely they're going to be able to say, okay, well, we need to be going door to door to break these enclaves of unvaccinated people where the virus is allowed to be able to mutate and run freely. And that's going to be the way they go about doing that. And if you're in a blue state, it's coming for you first. And the red states are going to be safer for a lot longer. It's like that, they don't have that kind of influence here. And they're not going to be able to do that here, but they will be able to do that in red areas in blue states. So if you're unvaccinated or you have a kid who you don't want to have to take the woke poke, you better get them out of there. Find a place where they're going to be safe and you can just hide your kids, send them to grandma's or whatever when the woke poke is coming. And, if grandma answers the door, they're going to be like, oh, this is an old lady. She doesn't, there are no kids here. And that would be the way to do that. And so it's like, obviously grandma hasn't had kids in 40 years. So, at least 40 years. So they're going to move right on by, and you better start making preparations for what's coming. The woke poke is about to come door to door. And this is how they're going. What Matt has just finished talking about is how they're going to justify it.
And I'd say that I don't think that they're going to apply it universally. Like you said, like the red areas, there's going to be holdouts in red areas. And I would say too that there's going to be, in a lot of red states, it's going to be applied in the blue areas in red states that are going to, like the major cities in some of the red states are going to get involved. And that's how the pressure is going to be put on the rest of them. But
that's going to be difficult for them for several reasons, but I won't go into that. It's blue state, red areas, blue states. Those are prime targets. Number one, blue cities and red states. That's going to be a little bit more difficult for them because they're going to get actual like gunfire. Like they will get gunfire.
What I would expect is that the blue states. So there's going to be people in the blue. There's going to be very blue people in the red states where it's like you look at the electoral map and it's like completely red everywhere, 80% red. And then it's like 45, 55 blue. it's like 45, whatever, the other way. You know, it's blue in the middle of the major urban centers. You're gonna get people within those state governments that are like, we want to be the example. We want to be the ones. We see ourselves as the infiltrators behind enemy lines, and we want to be the ones that get it accomplished in behind. And they're going to get a massive influx of cash and support and media coverage from the basically like the Act Blue or the Media Matters crowd.
And when they try to send people door to door, and particularly black neighborhoods, because that's where they have to go, because that's the only because all the white liberal. Okay, remember, liberals and conservatives, they're segregated by urbanicity, or how urban their community is. White liberals live in urban areas, not rural areas. And so if you're in the city area and you're a white person, chances are you've basically already had the woke poke. And and the only places to go door to door are the black neighborhoods. You try that in a black neighborhood, they're going to shoot you. And actually, if you want to be the one walking through a black neighborhood, trying to give their kids the woke poke, you're probably going to get robbed. I'm just saying, you're probably going to get robbed. And by the way, more power to them.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like you are making yourself a target. And again, because the gangs run those areas, and the gangs, people don't know this about gangs. They were originally designed to protect people because the cops wouldn't. If you want protection, you go to the gangs for it. You don't go to the cops for it. That's why they're there. And so if hey, you want to come give it to some gang member's younger brother or younger sister, you're going to drive by and I'm going to enjoy it. By the way, more power to the gangs. More power to them. And it's like that's what's going to happen to you. And this is not going to work out for the way they think it is. And that's that's why I say red areas in blue states are much less likely to fire back and have that kind of violent resistance. That's why they're going to be the target. Remember, second law of archetypism says they're going to go for the weaker targets first, rather than the larger targets. And the targets who will fight back, they're in the blue areas of red states. And by the way, if I'm on that jury and the gang members like I murdered one of the guys who was going to give my younger sibling the woke poke, I'm going to nullify. I was like, I'm telling they proved it. It's like, not, sure, they got fingerprints on video and all this other thing. No, didn't prove it. Not guilty. Fuck you. And and by the way, they probably know that too. So it's like, the blue areas of red states are more likely to be safe. And they're all, and that assumes they even go in anyway, which is like, kind of what you made that point. They don't really want to go after their own people, because that's a pretty quick way to lose the next election, particularly when it's 15 months away.
Ultimately, no matter what, I don't think that they're going to try to get they're not going to try to get universal coverage. They don't need to. They wouldn't. That the goal is to beat back the resistance. The goal isn't to actually, like, remember, the whole purpose of this isn't actually to do what they say it is. It's always a cover for some greater purpose of their own. And ultimately that is here. They want no resistance. They want absolute compliance. So they want people to act like they're compliant. If you act like you're compliant, if you aren't within a hotbed area, they don't have the resources necessary to enforce everywhere all the time. They don't have this isn't FDR's America. They don't have the resources or the buy-in collectively, nationally, to make their way through every neighborhood in America. So you have to be judicious. You have to be circumspect about where you put yourself and when you get there, because you got to get there soon, because I don't think this stuff's going to wait. The fact that I tweeted something today about how I saw a number of people today, like in deep libertarian communities, that said, oh, well, with the FDA mandating it today, or the FDA approving it today, there's kind of a Freudian slip there. With the FDA mandating it today, it's going to, they're like, I probably got to try to find a new job. And I'm like, brother,
You
if
need to
you were
find-
having that conversation now, you were too late when you were having that conversation in 2020. Like, if you're having that conversation now, you are probably got your goose cooked. This
All
is
the
the whole
places
wealth,
you
power, and
could've-
influence message.
All the places you could have found a new job, it's like they got taken a long time ago by people who were ahead of the curve. Yeah, like seriously.
Or they're now going to require vaccination for new employees.
Well, yeah, and that's another easy way to do it. But any employer who had a job opening and wasn't going to mandate it, that job opening got taken a long time ago.
Yeah,
you need to get the fuck out of there. Like that. You need to be having that conversation with your family right now about, okay, we're going to leave the state and pick up our lives and go somewhere.
Yep.
And secure the benefits of liberty for us and our posterity.
Yeah.
And, yeah, that's like by moving.
And Ron DeSantis's Ron DeSantis
you need to be having that conversation with
Republic
your
of Florida.
Yeah, exactly. Or any red state that you think it's going to be rural enough that it's not worth the cost of them to go door to door because that could be miles and miles away. The next door could be a mile away.
Right.
Okay, that's too much cost for them. It's not worth it to them. And I would be strongly suggest you have that conversation tonight because this just happened and you need to have that conversation tonight.
Yeah, Douglas says it's not that easy to uproot your life when you've been comfortably settled many years and there's no problem at the moment. Yeah, that's exactly why we're saying what we're saying. Is because
do it now.
There's a problem at the moment.
Yeah, you don't want to have a fire sale. So when you have to sell your property really quick, high time preference, that's when you're not going to get a good bargain for it. And if you really want, and it's a lot easier. Basically, it's a lot easier to prevent a problem than to solve one. There's a lot lower cost to. It's a lot less expensive to keep a problem from happening than to try to mitigate it in the idea. I mean, how much is fire insurance going to cost you before your house is burning down? How much is it going to cost you when it's burning down? You probably
right.
And you need to get ahead of that. It's coming. It's like you're stupid if you think you can wait till the last minute on this, and you're retarded if you think you can wait till the last minute. This is the last minute. It's like the day is now. It's here. You need to get the fuck out. And take your kid, take your wife, put him in the truck, get out.
The last illustration here of the this point of the way that this is going to infest everything. This article Amy sent me just earlier this morning from March of 2016, and the headline is: "Are there unintended consequences to calling breastfeeding natural?" Breastfeeding, it's only natural. It's a message women may have seen on Facebook or a state health department website or heard on the radio as part of a campaign launched in 2013 by the Department of Health and Human Services. But according to a pair of experts, this type of campaign could backfire in a big way. When federal and local health departments use the term natural to promote breastfeeding, it could inadvertently fuel concerns over other aspects of health and society that are seen as unnatural, such as vaccines, genetically modified food, and assisted reproductive technologies, the experts warn. The connection that they're making here is that when you promote breastfeeding as natural, it creates this dichotomy between medicine that's natural and medicine that's unnatural. And therefore, something that's unnatural, like vaccines, might be distrusted because of people calling something like breastfeeding natural. Can people see where this goes? Can you see the way that you take this forward? The way you take this forward is not only does it become, do they remove the ability to talk about something as natural like breastfeeding, where it becomes like a matter of malpractice to refer to it as natural, and maybe even just a straight up thought crime. But they go after things like the nature of this is that something like breastfeeding becomes a target itself. That now by breastfeeding, this is a cultural ritual for a tribe that isn't ours. We don't want you having your women walking around with only their eyes showing. We don't want you doing these cultural practices that aren't acceptable in our society. your cultural practice causes people to doubt the veracity of modern medicine. So we don't want you participate. You're not going to participate in our society if you're going to participate in this cultural artifact. That's where this is moving. That's how this is being implemented. That's how ubiquitous this is going to become in every aspect of your life.
The war on natural order. That's what the left is. The left's existence is a war on natural order.
Yeah.
And if you understand that, hey, the left wants chaos, that's their incentive, and the right wants order, that's their incentive. By the way, this whole idea that you're going to argue with the left from the left and argue from the right, this presumes that you understand their incentive system, which you probably don't. If you actually want to argue with the left from the left, you need to be arguing that how your idea is going to cause more chaos, which, by the way, is antithetical to liberty. And if you want to argue with the right, from a libertarian standpoint, you need to be arguing how your idea is going to provide more order and better order, So, by the way, and again, if you're arguing for chaos, like, buddy, this is not the kind of order that you want. This is not liberty. You cannot, chaos and liberty are like this stuff. They don't go together. And liberty, Mises is a subset of Carlyle, and that has to be that way. There's no order. Spontaneous order is one subset of order, and if you haven't figured this out about the left and the right by now, you're done. And this sort of again, the left, if you arguing with them from the idea, oh, this is going to hurt the black people, it's like they're fine with that.
Yeah. Again, this is another formal versus real meaning. That the formal meaning is, we care about minorities. The real meaning is this is something you can't turn down because we've made it socially untenable for you to oppose it. Mm-hmm. That's the purpose of appealing to vulnerable classes.
What you're saying is that like this is going to disrupt the order for black people. It's like they kind of like that. It's like they had a war on black families for like 70 years now.
Right.
It's like they're fine with that. Like most of the black people who get thrown into prison for nonviolent drug crimes are thrown into cages for nonviolent drug crimes in blue cities.
Yes. Yes.
It's like duh. It's like
by the very people who campaign on ending it.
Like literally by arguing with them that this is going to hurt black people, you're encouraging them. It's like that's a good thing. That's a feature, not a flaw. It's like that's what they want. It's like, gosh.
All right. Well, we're coming up on 2.5 hours. So why don't you give your plugs?
Thank you. You can find me at Private Nukes or Us on Twitter. No, I'm kidding. You can find the Private Nukes I'm dropping at Popular Liberty _ on Twitter. And you can find me at GOP Mises on Twitter. And I just saw that the Libertarian Party of Texas responded to me, and I'm going to have a wonderful nuke to come back at them with. So
get them tired.
You can see that there at GOP Mises. And you can, by the way, help me get to 1,000 so I can get super chats on my YouTube channel. I need that. So
just as long as you don't use promo code popular on anything.
The correct promo code, you mean.
The correct promo code for palomaverdecbd.com is KING. If you use promo code KING, you'll get 25% off any order over $75. If you use promo code popular, you will get 25% added to the cost of your order. And look, I'm going to mute you so you can't talk back. Thank you guys. We appreciate you putting up with us, showing up. It was fun. Thank you to everyone who dropped some super chats in there. We appreciate that. Again, go check subscribestar.com/kingpilled. And my profile is still under review, it says. So eventually there'll be something there that you can buy from us. But you can see the tiers that we created, and we got a good laugh out of those before we went live here. So, and then you can follow me on Twitter at RealKingPilled, and we will be back on Thursday to do this again.